Welcome to all who just arrived, and we will be starting now in a way, the last thematic day of this long week already, because we had started on Monday. So now we are dealing with urban critical infrastructure protection, and the issue will be indeed related to, again, as you have understood, building up synergies between different activities. So you'll have some presentations from panels discussing the issue. You will be able to interact with projects. You will be able to interact with policymakers, practitioners, to ensure that we are really gathering recommendations that could be useful for, I would say, usability of research, but also, in our case, research programming. As you know, we have a call which is open, which is on protecting infrastructure of Europe and people in European smart cities. And in particular, we have something very specifically tackling prevention, detection, response, and mitigation of combined physical and cyber threats to critical infrastructure in Europe, which includes urban critical infrastructure. This call is open this year until August, but it will be also open in 2019 and 20. So we have, I will not read the overall call. It's publicly available. It's the DRS. In fact, it's the Infra 1 topic of our work program. I would like to stress that it's quite important for us to gather not only the research community working on critical infrastructure, but also practitioners, policymakers that will be coming, but also operators. And it's quite difficult to make them come to this kind of forum. And we need really to have an established dialogue with them. For urban, it means that, and I don't know if there is a representation for that, we will need to get people from city authorities, from urbanism, architects coming to discuss with us, which is not yet the case. So we will be, I would say, gradually, this community is gradually built up. And you have understood that, well, we started in 4 years ago with a very small number of people. Now it's really enlarging, so we hope to have a further discussion in this respect. The first session, do I have the agenda here? I should have the agenda. The third session will be shared by Emanuele Bellini. So he is actually very much involved in applications which are related to urban development from Firenze in particular. So he will be the perfect person to chair this first panel. Do you wish me to invite your other, so Yvonne and Karim, who are invited to come to this table, and I leave you with them. I will be around in the room, but, well, as a tourist. Thank you very much.
Okay, good morning. My name is Emanuele Bellini. I'm from University of Florence, and I'm the coordinator of a Resolute project that is just finished 1 month ago. And here I'm going to show something that we did in the project, and also to set up the chain of urban resilience in general, with a focus also on specific urban critical infrastructure. Okay, if I can start with the slide, I can. Okay. Another? No. I continue to play. But the other side, so go back. Okay. No. Okay, I hope it's set them. Actually, we have time, because unfortunately Piero Pellizzaro cannot join in the panel. because of a personal issue, so I bring his apologize for that. So we can enlarge a bit more our presentations, but also is very useful to open the discussion with you. I'm not pressing nothing now, so I'm just waiting. Okay, in the meantime, I try to explain a bit the rationale behind the Resolute project. Okay, it's right, very good. Okay, the Resolute is focused on urban transport system. Of course, urban transport is one of the critical infrastructures of the city. Through streets pass most of our life, goods, services, and so that's why we decide to address this infrastructure. I press, but this is it's very strange behavior.
Don't use this. We'll pass your slides.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. And so the risk that there are in the city, of course, are propagated also through streets. If you can imagine about water supplier or about crowd that move in the city. So the streets is a vehicle for save citizens, but also is a place in which the citizens and the life can be affected by major risk. Flooding, for instance, the water flow in the streets, and according to the dimension of the streets, it accelerates or not, and could affect major damage to buildings, to cars, to the citizen. So resilience, in our perspective, is a bit different with respect to risk. Okay, so risk is something that related to what you know, so you can predict, you can estimate the damage, you can imagine what could happen, you can make some simulation. So you could have a huge list of risks that you take into account. Resilience is something that include, for our view, risk, but it deals with the unknown unknowns. So something that you cannot predict or prevent or anticipate in theory. What we can do, this not means that we cannot do nothing, but we can think in a different way. So next slide, please. Next slide, please. Next slide. No slide. Next slide. Okay. In order to set up a resilience environment, a resilience way of thinking in the city of Florence was one of our partner in the project, and we start to analyze what is go well, and which are the major drawbacks in current activities, and we identify a list. Like, for instance, the over-specification of the procedures. This is a quite common tendency that happen as soon as a disaster occur, because we usually, if we are looking for what is going wrong, and we try to reduce the degree of freedom in that specific case, thinking that this could reduce the probability that could happen in the future, but we know that is not true, and we are going to show why. Then we know that there are multi-decision makers, and usually these decision makers and operators tend not to interact with each other. They usually work in a silos way. Civil protection, fire brigade, police, and other operators, mobility department, tends to do their own job, sometimes also very good, in a very good way, but the problem is that they're not an official way to interact each other. So sometimes the data, the knowledge information happens only on voluntary base. So there is not a formal channel that forces each actors to share information useful for everybody to enhance their capability to cope with an emergency. Of course, there are micro-opportunistic behaviors. Just think about if I want to move from point A to point B and others want to move from point B to point 1. In the mobility scenario, each citizen acts according to his own objectives that is very difficult to coordinate them. Also during an emergency, there are some unpredictable behavior. And this could be an issue if you want to be effective and save the majority of the life. Of course, there are fragmented, heterogeneous data sources. This is another big issue. So the city generated tons of data. Utilities generate data, traffic generate data, citizens generate data. But the Internet of Things generate data, sensors, but there is not common standards. The data formats are sometimes proprietary, others are open, but very diverse. And it's very difficult to deal with this such heterogeneity. Also, fragmented responsibilities. So sometimes happen that no one knows who is responsible for a specific piece of street. This is something happened in Italy when a bridge collapsed because of a big van passed through over. And no one between region, province, city, society, company that managed the street knows who was responsible for that. That is a big issue that sometimes prevents an efficient reaction. Then we know the classical scarcity of the resources. That is, I think, something that can be common in all public administrations. Multi-channel communications. Also, the emergency can, or the alert can are communicated through different channels, and it's difficult to understand the impact of these channels, because we have panels spread in the city, we have radio, we have TV, we have internet, we have mobile phone, but there is not a coordination of these messages. So each of them are connected to a specific department, and the communication, the way how to communicate emergency could change according to the people that are involved in this activity. Then we have a common attitude of the authorities to neglect preparing and adapting phases. Instead, we prefer to waiting that something happened, then react, because it's more evident, or let's say we consider it's difficult to quantify the social and economical benefit of the preparedness, of the prevention, because it's something that is not immediately tangible at the political for the audience, for the citizen. So if you clean the border of the river, no one is able to recognize, okay, you can say, oh, it's nice, but maybe it was cleaned because of in case of flooding, the river could flow better and reduce the risk. But this is very difficult to explain to the citizen. That's why, for political convenience, sometimes happen that we prefer not to invest in preparation. Okay, and the last one, weak population preparedness. This is very critical, and that was explained 2 days ago here. So we made a questionnaire during an civil protection exercise, and we realized that the people are not aware about what kind of risk they could be affected. Also, they tend to overestimate their capability to cope with an emergency, cope with a risk, and they tend not to follow or to accept authoritative messages. This is another critical point. So if you want to evacuate someone, the risk is that you send to them a message and no one is going to follow because don't trust the authorities on that. So there are a lot of work that should be done at the cultural level to overcome these specific drawbacks and potential risk. Okay, the Resolute project work in a different level. In particular, is focused on big data. And this is the outcome that we obtain after 3 years. So the European management guidelines, and because it was stated clearly in the call, so we analyze the situation. We create some recommendations for the practitioners, for decision makers, to apply some policies, to apply some actions in order to reduce the variability of the city. Instead of not reduce the risk, reduce the daily variabilities that could happen in daily life, okay? The CRAMS, that is a tool that allow data sharing among different operators. The mobile emergency app, that is an application for citizens that support their local decision for guide them to, towards a safe area during an emergency. And a game-based training app for citizens also to increase their awareness or their preparedness instead of like a face-to-face meeting through fun. So they learn something during playing game. Okay, this is a way to avoid some barriers, cognitive barriers that citizens usually have when someone tries to teach them something. Okay, next slide. Next slide, please. Let's start again. Okay. The project talked about what resilience is. And there are, as you know, a lot of definitions. And according to the disciplines, so resilience, you have resilience in psychology, you have resilience in environmental science, you have resilience in information technologies. And there are, at least we identified 2 major families of definition. The first one is resilience as ability to prepare, ability to plan, absorb, recover, and adapt. This comes from US, National Academy of Science of US, and include the time scale of the event, okay? Instead, the next one, please. Okay, another definition is based on adaptive capacities. So it's more related to resource management. And it happens, it should be continuously developed. So we do not wait that something happens to measure resilience, as in the previous definition, which you have the classical curve, and in which you can estimate the time for and the reduction of the functionality and then the time for recovery. And but we need to wait that something happens to say, okay, we went a good job. Instead, if you think about adaptive capacity, you should continue to work on the capacity of the city to cope with an emergency. And this is more related to resource management. Resource, in a broad sense, human resource, knowledge resource, financial resource. Okay, so if we are able to understand or to detect low resource in some of the specific elements identified, maybe even if nothing happens, the probability to not to be able to cover with an emergency increase. So that's why we changing the perspective from waiting that something happens to measure, to continuously measure our capability to react could, let's say, enhance the capability of the city as a whole to manage a risk or to manage a disaster. And the capacity can be identified in 4 pillars. And the capability to respond, the capability to monitor, the capability to anticipate, the capability to learn. In particular, in Resolute project, we focus on the capability of monitoring. Okay, so, and we are going to implement something strictly related to big data processing, big data collection, big data analytics, and in order to support decision makers in their daily decision. Okay, next slide, please. Okay. We also try to combine the two views. Okay, so taking into account the time span on the timing of the event and also the adaptive capacity, that is something can be continuously increased. And I think we can go in the direction of the smart panarchic cities. So we have a cycle that continuously works, and this means mobilizing urban adaptive capacity in a multi-scale time frame cycle. So it's a sort of a first attempt, let's say, of a synthesis of different families, of different definitions, adopting, let's say, the concept of smart city. So we start to, our assumption is that a city, if it's smart, it also is, they have more possibility to be resilient because we have more information, because we have more, we have a capabilities to monitor more things, and that's why we are able to reduce the inherent uncertainty that we have in our in the daily decisions. Next slide, please. Okay. So, in summary, we can identify a paradigm shift from risk to resilience. In particular, we can identify, instead of forcing stability, we can work in damping variability. Or instead of resist, we should invest in adapting capacity. Instead of creating new barriers, we can work on a capability to adapt and the flexibility of the city to cope with the unexpected situation. Instead of work on expected knowns, consider unknowns. Or instead of the system, the critical infrastructure, instead of break down at the boundaries of the performance, we should design for a graceful degradation of the service. Or let's say, instead of a centralized control, go to decentralization, exploiting local and citizen knowledge, local knowledge, because it's very difficult for a central point of view to be aware of what's happening in a very small part of the city. It's very difficult to cover all the city with sensors, but the citizens know what's happened there. So it's very important not to command them in any case, in all of their actions, but just to allow them to act in an opportunistic way, so exploit their own capability to save themselves and to communicate how to do that to the others and share this information, for instance. Another point is, instead of reducing the degree of freedom, increase, so enlarge the margin of maneuver, or working on problem-solving capability instead of waiting that the first responders arrive to save you. This is another way to enhance social resilience, okay? This is also reduce or increase the effectiveness of first responders to save life during emergency. And the last thing, instead of bounce back or bounce back better, is the same thing that say bounce forward, okay? So it's not strictly necessary to bounce back in the previous functionality level. We could also think about the next one. Okay, if I destroyed a school, we can decide to rebuild the school in the same place. This is just to answer to a question that arises the first day. Why to decide to build a school in the same place in which an earthquake destroyed it? Maybe because the place is something that has a social value. So if I move a school in another place, the risk is that I reduce the cohesion of the society, because the school there represents a social value for the society. That's why this is one of the decisions why we can continue to build a school in the same place. But bounce forward means also to develop the city with the new technologies. We could also think about that the school can represent a place not just for teaching, but also to recover people during an emergency. So forward means to open new possibilities in design, open new possibilities how to reuse existing or new infrastructure for different purpose. Next slide, please. Okay, in Resolute, we started to analyze the infrastructure with some model. We use a FRAM model. There are several methods to do that, but we started to take into account the system as a whole, not just the infrastructure, but also the interdependencies, the function that exist. And in the urban transport system, you have interaction with the energy, you have interaction with the city council, you have interaction with the citizen. So the infrastructure needs to be considered with all the interdependencies that it has. Okay, so because a disruption in the infrastructure affects several stakeholders. And to operationalize the concept of resilience and the guidelines, we start to implement a platform based on big data. This was possible to do that because Florence, for instance, invests a lot of money in Internet of Things, in big data, in data generation, data collection. So we had a very good environment to apply this method. Next slide. Okay, this is an example in which Resolute work in different phases. Basically, we work a lot on in all the 4 phases, but prepare and adapt and also absorb because we have a real-time detection of the information. So this real-time information is very useful for absorb and maybe in part for recover. And big data analysis in general is very useful for preparation and adaptation because we can learn from the dynamic of the city. And in this way, we are able to map the actions, the outcome of the project in all the 4 phases of the resilience, but what we developed in the capacity building. So the capacity of monitoring, the capacity of prepare has been mapped on the 4 phases of the resilience, on the resilience curve. Next slide, please. Okay, this is just to give you an example, a model of the urban transport system in Florence that take into account the link are in the interdependencies, and the hexagon are the functions identified. We identified 25 functions, different functions that interact each other. And of course, issues are propagated among the interdependencies. Sorry, dependencies, because the model is not bidirectional, okay? So next slide, please. Okay, this is a list, a preliminary list or a summary of the kind of data that we use and that exist in a smart city, let's say. We have the traffic data flows, we have a public mobility service in real-time position, open data that are not in real-time but are useful. Example of open data are the risk map, flooding map, risk map in which they are available on shape file, and everyone can download it and look from the open data portal of the city council. We have a social network. We also work with the Twitter, and through a tool, the name is Twitter Vigilance, to monitor the trend of the comments. And thanks to this tool, we were able to, that is very useful for early warning, not just to understand the big peak, but the small peak, the small signal that could occur in the social channel like Twitter. And also, it's nice to understand that through Twitter, because we have, just to give an example, we have the real-time information of the people movement in the city, and with a heat map that track the people and the concentration of the people. And also we have the social media that with the comments. So if you look only to the heat map, you don't know why the people concentrate or move around. Looking at the social media, instead, you can with some assumptions, qualify the reason why the people are moving faster than expected in a specific area. This is a very nice way to combine different resources generated by the crowd. Next slide, please. Okay, this is an example of the platform. It's a multi-layer platform, totally decoupled. It's open source and already available on GitHub. And we have on the bottom line a big data layer able to collect in real time data from the city. The challenge here was not just to fuse the different formats of data together, but also to collect information, because as I said, there are a huge heterogeneity, and so you need a different process for each kind of data sets that you want to collect. So this, if you have 1,000 data sets different, you need a 1,000 different process because of different formats, different rate, different dimension, and something, different policies of access, different way to access FTP, APIs, and something like that, okay? And then we have a mission critical layer in which we apply some logic, and on top we have the dashboard. The dashboard is something that should be designed according to the information needs. So it's not something that just for fashion put some colors and some charts there. We work with our end users, so city council, civil protection, fire brigade, and something like that. And we ask them which are the missing information that they would like to have to increase their daily decisions, the precision of their decision, or the timing of their decision. And according to the answer, we look at the data availability. Sometimes we should generate, is needed to generate new data sets that are not existing in the city at that moment. In other time, these information are available, but needs to be elaborated and presented in a proper way. And the results of the dashboard design come from the end user interaction. Next slide. This is the example of the schema of the information sharing. What is important is the dashboard can be tailored according to the end user. So it's not something that is written in the stone. Once it's designed, that's it. But can be adapted, can be changed, because we have an engine behind, a builder. And the idea was to install this dashboard in each control room that are in the city council. So from the measure control room, to the mobility department control room, to civil protection control room. So the idea is not to replace existing system to concentrate everything, but to open a sort of window to enhance the, let's say, the information or the awareness about what's happening. So the operators can combine the classical information that arrive from the ground by the operators, by the police, with other information arrived with different sources. Put them together, we expect, or we are quite confident that the capability to react enhanced, okay? Next slide. This is an example of the dashboard. For instance, just to give you an example, we have on the right the real-time analysis of Twitter according to some specific keywords. Below you have the heat map, in which is represented the people concentration. And in the middle of the screen, you have the real-time figures related to how many injuries are in the hospital, in the emergency room, according to the tag. Red tag, yellow tag, green tag. So we know in real time if a hospital is overcrowded or not. In this way, ambulance manager could decide to redirect the ambulance in another hospital. Instead of working, which is the shortest path, they could take also into account if that hospital is able to manage a new injuries, okay? Next slide. And then this is another thing that we work in the project. We work with the kids. We clearly design a tabled game. So, because when we talk about technology, we should take into account that technology is not only digital. Okay? Technology could be everything that allow us to transfer something or to enable, to empower to do something. So we design a game, a desk game, and we train 300 more or less kids in the school. And after 2 hours that they play this game like a goose game, so goose in the Riskland is the name, at the end the kids were able to know how to behave better than before, how to behave during earthquake, during a flooding, during different kind of risk. Just to give you an example, before the game I asked to them, if you see a friend of you that is in dangers during a flooding, are you going to launch yourself in the water to save him? And everybody say yes. But this is wrong, definitely is wrong. After the game, they realize that the best decision to do that is to call for help, call for operators, or just to, let's say, call someone that is stronger than him or than them to save the friend. Okay? Because otherwise the risk is that you, instead of having one kid, you have 2 kids to save. Instead of send them 2 fire responders, you should send them 5, 6, because the people to be saved are more. And this is a matter of resource allocation during the emergency. So it's very important to work also at cultural level, starting for sure from kids. Let's slide. Okay, the expected impact. And we measure this impact because also we assess the impact of the guidelines with some indicators. We identify more or less 180 indicators that could represent the capability of the city to be measured, to be the resilience capability of the city, and we can say we are able to demonstrate the capacity of timing intervention of the operators, timely and true response, as we said before, effective information propagation with multiple communication channels. So it is very important because if we share the information among the operators, the probability that we are able to keep a coherence of this information. So the communication will be, communication converge towards the same idea of the fact. Fast restoration of pre-emergency and a stronger perception of the risk within the community. Okay, that's it. Thank you very much. Okay, now I leave the floor to Yvonne, that is one of the coordinator of the RS7 with us, and she represents a very good work that we done together.
Thank you.
It's yours.
Okay, thank you, Philippe. Where is Philippe? For the invitation. I don't see him. For the invitation, I'm very happy to be here I'm representing all the DRS7 projects. So we are 5 projects dealing with operationalization of resilience. And now we have the presentation here. And I would like to share what we learned. This is a kind of discussion, so you are invited to ask questions. So, let's see, okay. So we start with the end of mind, what we learn at the end of the projects. The purpose is that we have at the beginning a lot of literature of resilience, a lot of knowledge of resilience, but how we can put this in practice. So the purpose of the projects was to operationalize resilience in different ways. And what is the conclusion, as I will show you here, is that we have achieved to bring some of these concepts to practice. The different projects have different scopes. So within that scope, there are different tools that are developed. I will give you some overview of that. And these tools are complementary. So this is kind of the most of the important conclusion. We have arrived here to show you some of these results. So as I mentioned, the achievements are related to bring closer to the market resilience concepts, have specific tools to achieve that. And the purpose of the projects, it was to develop European resilience management guidelines. All the projects, as the one that Emmanuel was showing, was the overall purpose of the project. And the purpose of this talk is to motivate you, to give some curiosity of the tools that we have developed, to motivate you to use what we have done and to build on that. So I will start talking about the concepts, which are the concepts, what we mean by resilience. We have worked 3 projects about that. Then I will talk about the tools that they are developed, also how these tools are complementary, the source of evidence. I will talk about how the relation was with the standardization. This will be very short because it will be a session on that afterwards. The presentation is based on a white paper that we prepare all the projects together. And the white paper talks about how these tools can be integrated. So there's still work on the integration of these tools for the future. This part will not be discussed here because we have time limitation and we would like to have more time for discussion. And last but not least, all these projects are around an end user. So we will discuss which kind of end users, how we involve end users, and what is the experience from that. And if you have some comments how we can do better, please go ahead. So what we see is there are a lot of challenges in the society in terms of the interdependencies that we have within and among critical infrastructures. Emmanuel talked about the silo approach, how we can look around how critical infrastructures can work together and affect each other. We have challenges in the population, a lot of migration that many countries have experienced. We have a challenge with the more digitalization that is coming. We have climate change, we have emergent threats, and we have a lot of emphasis on risk. On Monday, we heard about the Sendai framework and how is the focus on enhancing risk management capabilities. And as Emmanuel mentioned, the risk management capabilities is towards a specific risk. We prepare plans, we develop exercises and train with this expected risk. So with resilience, we would like to broaden this perspective. So we go to talk about the concept of resilience. And now we see in the UNISDR definition, the focus on resilience, as we see, it's defined as the ability to resist, absorb, accommodate, and recover from. And this is the definition from 2009. In 2000, the current definition also includes to use the risk analysis for that. And in the projects, we see that the resilience, as we have been working, is a complement to risk management. So we see that we are not advocating just for one common view of resilience. We encourage a diverse view of resilience. And we have done literature surveys, a very wide literature survey where we found 300 different definitions on resilience. And we can see that the resilience can be seen as rebound and recover, this kind of bounce back. It can be related to maintain a stable state. It can be related to more holistic approach to see how the adaptability and also how you can continue this adaptability for a longer period. So we are talking about extend this adaptive capacity and even thrive in terms, even reorganize and take an opportunity and do things better. So the projects have contributed in different ways to these different views on resilience. If we see the Improver and the Resilience project, they focus more in one more reductionistic view on resilience, focusing in bounce back and maintaining the essential functions of the critical infrastructures. We see the smart, mature resilience that is focused on the cities and the social aspects on the cities. So it takes into account how you go to maintain to a stable state and how you can adapt the adapted capacity. While we see the other 2 projects, Darwin and Resolute, they focus on sustain the adaptive capacity. They talk about new things like flexibility, self-organization, sources of resilience. So all these projects, as you see, they have complementing view on resilience. So what we would like to advocate is that we see that there is a lot of emphasis on rebound, bounce back, where we see a need to further work in the part of adaptation and extend the adaptive capacity. So to have a balanced view on the resilience aspects. So we go now to the end users. So why we need to use end users? So they are essential for all the projects because they The researchers and the academics come with a body of knowledge, and then we build this together with the end users. In the different projects, they have helped to define the requirements, what they are the needs. They have helped also to co-create solutions to see during the different events. And then also they have helped also to evaluate the solutions that they have been developed. And now we are in the phase that some of the projects that they are helping also, they are adopting and adapting some of the solutions to their own context. So they are also our end users. They have helped to create the solutions and now are becoming early adopters on some of the solutions that are proposed. So who are we talking about? So we have 5 projects. So what is common is the mark in bold. So we see that the first responder, critical infrastructure managers, critical infrastructure operators. We have the research community. In Darwin, we also include NGOs, and in Smart Mature Resilience, they include the city and the citizens. So there are a little difference between the projects, but we have gone through the different stakeholders in the project. I forgot to say that in the way that how we work with the end users, we have done surveys, we have done face-to-face workshops, we have done another project, they have living labs. So there are many ways of cooperating, and we have done webinars. So there are different ways to involve and also focus groups. So some of the examples of the interventions that they are proposing, the different projects. So as I mentioned, each project has their own scope. So Smart Mature Resilience is focusing on cities. Resolute was focusing on urban. Darwin is addressing healthcare and air traffic management, but also how this can inspire other critical infrastructures. So the projects have different bricks to that. So here is an example of the different tools. Some are related to the definition. In the definition, you can find from the different projects lexico. You can find also taxonomy, as in the Resolute. You can have also tools dealing with the strategic. For example, a tool dealing with the maturity in terms of resilience for the city, how they can mature that. In terms of analysis, in Darwin, we have developed some concept cards related to the 10 resilience concepts that the end users say that this was the most important to advance when we are talking in terms of crisis management. So we have also the training. In the training, there are different tools on the training. We have serious game using virtual reality. We have the game training app that it was developed in Resolute. We have tools for simulation, and there are, for example, city resilience dynamic tools, stakeholder analysis. So there are many different tools that have been tested and have been evaluated and are available for you. So here are some of the most important for each project. I highlight each project, highlight one of the results. I can talk for the Darwin project. We have this Darwin that is in terms of a wiki. It contains concepts related to resilience, and the idea of the resilience guidelines is not that something that will come on top of of another procedure to do. In Darwin, we talk about the concepts help you to give a critical view of your own organizations, how your organization is adapting and how can improve the adaptation, because resilience is already there. So the idea is to understand what resilience you have in the organization and across organizations and how you enhance that. So you have other tools. You have also the e-learning resources in e-learning material that from the resilience project, you have this continual professional development. So they are complementing the guidelines with training material, and we have also strategic tools, kind of roadmap, how you can advance in terms of city resilience, for example. So evidence of benefits. So what is in for me? So all these projects have done different pilots in different critical infrastructures. I will show you an example on that, but this is the idea to see what is the added value from the critical infrastructure point of view and how we advance this concept to practice. Here from the Darwin project, this is, we have done other pilots, but these are the big main ones that we have done. So the idea is that we have tested different concept cards within and across different infrastructures. So here you can see that, the concept related to roles and responsibility from the resilience point of view, how you can analyze, how you can improve that. And then these have been tested in different domains like healthcare, aviation, maritime, and so on. In the SMR project, they have tested the tools in the different cities, in the 3 main cities, Glasgow, Donostia, San Sebastian, and Kristiansand. And what we see is that from both projects, we have seen last week, if some of you were there, some cities are already adopting the tools. In the Darwin project, we have also early adopters, like the Red Cross in Sweden, that they are start adopting the things that we are doing. So concerning policy and standardization, on policy, we contributed with the white paper among all projects, and in standardization, the project's participants contribute to some ongoing standards. On Monday was mentioned the resilience standard. It was also talk on the crisis management. So we have been working on that, and in particular, maybe this afternoon, it will be a talk on that, how SMR has done a specific effort to do some resilience related to cities. So this is the final conclusion. As I start with, is that we have a lot of tools, a lot of methods and training material, and the purpose here is that you can contact us and you can use the material is public, and you are invited to use that. And last but not least, we are talking about from protection to adaptation, from risk management to complement to resilience management. I heard that there will be an update on the knowledge management from Sendai, so it would be good if we can have these developments on board. So these are our gifts for you, and these are acknowledged to my colleagues, all the other coordinators, a participant of the other projects, and here you can have information of the tools and things that we are doing. Do you have any question? Okay, afterwards? Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much, Yvonne. Very inspiring. I already know the presentation, but okay, it's very, very good. Now I'm going to introduce you Karim Selwan from Vinci Construction. Is one of the biggest company in the world, and is going to introduce something that they are working on the company. Thanks.
Hello. I present a feedback and my experience about a new startup, a new design office, which is building now to accompany, to serve, and to design the new solutions on the resilience to answer the climate change stakes. The name is Resilience. Why Resilience? Because this is a construction between resilience and alliance. And the alliance, it's the key of the project because this is an interaction between the research, university, and the open innovation. Well, at stake facing climate change, this is the first problematic issue. You have some illustration about the impact of climate change on several infrastructure like airport, bridge. You have Paris under the... Oh, non, ça marche pas. Excuse me. Yes, voilà. You have several illustrations about flooding in Paris, the Bangkok airport under the water, the fire in the San Francisco, and a site in New York. With the site is broken by the hurricane. Well, the second stake is resilience evident. How much will it cost the private and public stakeholders if we don't tackle resilience? This is a big, big question because we need to take this problem to reduce the capex and the opex, and because VINCI, for example, we need to design, build, and operation. Where is the responsibility to serve and to propose infrastructure and resilient infrastructure? Now the climate change or just all the ecosystem of the market. In fact, the technical stakeholder ecosystem is changing. The planning and the implementation infrastructure project is changing too. And the question is how innovative model can be created to respond to the uncertainty associated with climate change. One of the solutions facing climate change, what innovative technical, financial, and governance model to build? One of the way is to use the entrepreneurship and intrapreneurship program. This is the Leonard program, okay? Oh, I'm very sorry because, yes. Oh. Okay, that's right. Okay, well. Okay, this is the... Je reviens en arrière, okay? Alors, this is the resilience dividends, okay? The first issue, this is the cost. Who are the responsibility of the cost, the insurance issue with the climate change impacts, okay? And the climate change is changing the ecosystem between the different stakeholders and the construction and the contracting projects. Okay. Well, facing the climate change, this is what I told you just before. What innovative technical, financial, and governance model to build? This is a Leonard. This is a new open innovation and entrepreneurship program. Okay. And this is a map who show the emerging the resilience ecosystem. You have 4 pillars: the private pillars and the institutional or public pillars, business partnership, technical partnership for the private sector, institutional partnership, for example, 100 resilient cities, the C40, AFD, the Banque Française de Développement, for example, Munich Climate Insurance Initiative, and the scientist partnership with several universities in France and all over the world. Why this ecosystem? Because we try to find, with open innovation and interaction with the university, the new solution to build a new business model, a new design office to answer the stake of the climate change impact on infrastructure. Structuring now a new research approach to answer the rapid change of the private sector facing climate change. This is the big problem because we are 2 different scale of time. The private sector had a short vision, short and short, okay? And the time of the development in the university is more long. How we could build a good balance between the 2 targets? This is the approach to build stakeholder social and physical scientists in different disciplines, like to co-design, for example, a new college on the data, big data, co-production and co-implementation. This is one result of this mapping. I present you now the systemic approach by open innovation because one of the solutions is not to develop from scratch some solution. There is a lot of solution by startup or university, and the stake is how you could connect this solution to integrate in the big platform. For example, you are in RAID. Some solutions that we had detected, like Azure, for example, by University of Barcelona, Flood Resilience Index by University of Sofia Antipolis, for example, or Barocca Bruno with the University of Marne-la-Vallée. Second step, from the ecosystem by different stakeholders and university and research. We define and we identified some tools now which model we could develop. This model is not a model which is building from scratch. It's a building which integrated different tools. This map, show you like a functional resilience model, because we propose to anticipate the climate change impacts, but we build only infrastructure. The question is how to build infrastructure, but to observe 116 degrees around the infrastructure. We need to change the scale of the approach, not only the infrastructure, but the interaction between the infrastructure and the territory, society, and different stakeholders on the territory. We precise the scale of the models, the functional resilience model, and the stakeholders. I precise this approach. It's an approach which is developed with several universities, like Université de Marne-la-Vallée and Sophia Antipolis. Here, you could show that different scale of approach. The analysis 1, neighborhood scale. The analysis 2, integrate neighborhood scale. And the analysis 3, component scale. This approach is an innovative approach on the contracting industry, okay? Because par habitude, we use only the study only in the infrastructure. No, we don't show the interaction between the infrastructure and the different aspects. We need, if you want to integrate resilience, we need to change the scale of study and the scale of the design. One of the results is to develop a proof of concept by a workflow from data to simulation models. This model, this proof of concept is building or are built by different actors. We integrate the raw data, predictive model, derived product, statistical analysis, information, and key consideration. This is, now I will show you the result, the first result of this platform. This is a proof of concept we are tested on the Région PACA in the southeastern France. Ah, I'm sorry, j'avais pas suivi. Yes. You show it or not? No, okay. Well, this is the map of different tools, okay? And this is the model that we are building now. This model integrates different scale of aspects to build a stronger infrastructure, not only the infrastructure, but the interaction with different infrastructure, like the network with the transport, with water system, energy water plant system, for example. Now, we focus on different scale, the scale between the neighborhoods, the stake with the component scale. There are 3 steps and 3 different scales. And this model integrates a proof of concept. We build a proof of concept, integrate different data, open source, the open data, and different models, and different statistic analysis. This is the results. No, up. Voilà. We tested this proof of concept in the Southern Europe. The aim of the platform is to identify the impact of the climate change in different scale, national or regional scale, to project the evolution of the climate change in a different time scale from different decades. The aim is to integrate different components and different pillars of infrastructure like transport, etc. Here we test a resilience approach to identify the level of resilience by per building in one area. This is a highway that Vinci is the operator, and we project the impact of the temperature, the fire, and the interaction by sensitive building and the flooding. Well, the final product is resilience, a package services, but this new services combine consulting, modeling, and business strategy. In fact, it's not a product which is born or building alone. This is a result. This is a result of open innovation with new starter outside the Vinci company and the university. Well, from my feedback, what are the contributions of innovative entrepreneurship? This is a good opportunity to test the interaction with the outside stakeholder, with university, for example, public center, public research center, and the other company too. And the conclusion, this is, we know that with the climate change, it's impossible to have the solution inside the company. We need to discuss, we need to exchange with the other stakeholders, because the climate change, it's a holistic and very complex issue. That's why we take this way to develop this program, this resilience project, with the lot of stakeholders in French, in Europe, and in all around the world. That's right. Excuse me, because I'm very stressed by the presentation. This is the end. J'ai pas vu le... Hop. Voilà. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Very inspiring presentation. I have two questions for the panelists, and then we can open for the others. The first one is for Karim, and then for you. It's very interesting how a private company does the job that usually should be done by, let's say, public administrations, so involving stakeholders around a big infrastructure, let's say, how should be developed, which are the interactions with the stakeholders. And my question is, how you, in which way you engage stakeholders, if the contribution from the stakeholders is truly effective, or instead of you have some problems of delays, or difficult to have them committed for, because I assume that the design from a private company requires some timing, because we have contracts signed with to be respected. So open the innovation, open the design to third parties to collect contribution that is absolutely good. Maybe it could be difficult to manage them properly in respect to the timing of the contract.
All depends on the contract. In France, we have the PPP, the partenariat public-privé, donc public-private partnership. There are some projects that it's possible to build an open innovation to build a new solution. In this case, it's easy. But if the public tender don't include the innovative solution, it's more difficult. Donc the question is, if the operator is proactive, and if he is proactive, who supports the cost of this investment? Now, we could consider this investment could be a test. We don't take care if we win or not the contract or the tender, for example, but we could test the approach. Donc, we are different type of situation if we could try and test the solution without to focus on the business. Okay, this is one of the stakes we should to observe after for the long term of the market. Okay, and the resilience climate change and the climate change is the big opportunity to remove or to change our approach. Because the climate change will not stop tomorrow. It's long processes. That's why we consider it's a challenge to invest in this solution, in this mistake.
Thank you very much. And instead, the question for Yvonne is related to, as you know, there are a lot of definitions about resilience. As you properly show, different projects adopt its own perspective. And my question is how this fragmentation in resilience definitions applied to critical infrastructures affect, let's say, the policy from the public administration to invest in resilience. Because according to different perspectives, you could focus on one thing instead of others. So this means that maybe the definition drive too much how to apply at policy level.
So what we see is the different ways of looking at the system. So what you look for is what you find, and what you find is what you fix. Is a known publication, but the point is to have a balance between this protection and adaptation, to have the balance to have, and that's what we were doing with the projects. We need both to be prepared for expected events, but we also be open that the events can combine or will happen in unexpected conditions, and the degree of uncertainty and the amount of resources that we have available. So we need to cope with that. So the point is the balance, and that's what we were focusing in the project. But of course, the way that the different understandings they challenge each other, and they provide richer information. So the point is not to focus on one way of understanding, but to focus on the diversity and what they bring to improve the situation.
Okay, do you consider an added value to reach a common definition at European level of resilience?
I think that the common definition should, yes, it would be good to have a common understanding, a consensus as a start point, but it shouldn't be closed away because we are learning all the time. So I think that is something that needs to evolve. But what I saw last time is that the current definition by UNSTR is giving a lot of emphasis now on risk management and risk analysis. And we have a very good way on risk management and risk analysis, but we need to explore this part of adaptation, improvisation, and flexibility that resilience is bringing into the table.
Okay, thank you very much. And now it's open for your question. And please.
Yes, thank you very much. Good morning. My name is Ian Clark, and I work at the European Commission, the Joint Research Centre, and I was also involved in negotiating the Sendai framework before. I think this definition of resilience is in some ways causing some problems because, the EU has defined it last year as contributing to sustainable development and the need to be able to reform, and I think this is particularly important, this idea of trying to prevent new risks creating. That's also underlying the Sendai framework, and I didn't see that coming out of these projects. I see adapting to the consequences of an event and so on, yes, but I think really we must be, and risk management is trying to prevent new risks occurring and to cope with existing risks so that they cause the least damage possible.
Yes, Ian, thank you, and thank you for your presentation on Monday. But that was the start point of the projects. It was how resilience complements risk management. And that's why you are not seeing the emphasis on risk management, because we have a risk management standard, we have a lot of there's still a lot of work to do in the area of risk management. But the focus on this project, it was to look at resilience, how this will complement risk management. And that's why you didn't see that. So, but I'm very happy to hear from your side that this, the definition can be a barrier also to progress. Thank you.
Yes, I would say also one word on this regard. Yes, if a very good risk management could anticipate a new risk, okay, but sometimes, as I said, the resilience, if it's deal with the unknown unknowns, means that there are something that absolutely is not possible to also imagine. And this is something instead that we need to take into account when you manage your resources, when you prepare your citizen. So the two things should stay together, should talk each other, and benefit from the, let's say, each other input improvement. But we need to open the views also to a resilience aspect, because we can learn something that is not possible to address in the risk management, I think. Any other question? Yeah.
Hello, my name is Judith van Brugge. I'm from the Netherlands Aerospace Center, the NOR. It's a bit of another question than was discussed before. On one of your first slides, there was mentioned that the quality of the information used within these infrastructures is important. And so my question is, how did you address the validation, verification of the information you use in your framework?
For who?
Both
okay, you want to say?
Because it's addressed in almost all the projects.
In infrastructure project, we have a cycle project: design, build, commissioning, and operation. The question is, during the conception, what is the level of, about the normalization? This is a convergence between the normalization, the rule, and the level of the risk. Who support this risk? The question is in the hand of the project, when we give the building of the infrastructure on the next operator, how we supervise and monitoring the risk during the life cycle of the infrastructure. And at this time, we have not answered. That's right, we try to create a new business model with the insurance, for example, the normalization, and the financial aspect, and the technical engineering aspect. This is my answer.
So what we do is that we are collecting data from different sources of information, and we have, when we are doing the test of the concepts, the point is that to have the validation with the different stakeholders, and we have these pilots in different countries, because there is also the relevance for different European areas and for different critical infrastructures. So this was validated with the end users, and we have also a methodology, both quantitative and qualitative, how you validate the data that we are using. But this is the way that we work in the project, is that the knowledge evolves, and you learn and how you can update that. So we were not talking about the deadlines that can, guidelines that can be put in a report in the shelf, but they are able to adapt and evolve as you are finding new knowledge or new things to change and improve.
To complete, during the conception of the infrastructure, we tried to introduce some modelization. And in the modelization, you have some data and the predictive model. The question is, which is the level of the uncertain results? Now, there was not answer. Donc, this is a choice, how we define the risk to accept a level of risk, because the risk is linked by the uncertain by the predictive model. Okay, we are sure that the way and the predictive evolution of the climate change. We are not sure which it is we are the different way of the evolution of the climate change. This evolution, this predictive model, should be introduced during the conception. Now the question is, what is the acceptation of this risk? Because, for example, if you are the flooding, we could support that the flooding we are 2 meters or 5 meters, but probably it will be 7 meters. Okay, but how we decide the level of this flooding?
I would say from Resolute perspective, the quality of the information basically was related to social media information, and this is one issue because processing Twitter is a huge and hard work to extract meaningful information. So the quality is something that needs to be for sure taken into account, and to reduce the, let's say, or to enhance the quality of one signal. One way is to looking for other signals that confirm that trend. So not to trust too much in one single channel, but find new ways, new confirmed around of the data sources, of the information sources, just to looking for if the direction is what is detected in one of these channels. This is a way. Then there are others, in particular information technology related to reputation and reputation of the source of the information and something like that. But in particular, if you look at the concept of the dashboard, in which you have a lot of information coming from different sources, different organizations, different methods to generate data. One way that we found is to identify if the indicators, the meaning of each indicators goes or represent the same thing. Because the problem is to understand an event is an event and its complexity. The signal in some way flattens this complexity because you detect only one specific part of that event. So if you detect more parts of that event, increase your capability to understand what is happening. So, but what is important is that all indicators surrounding or all sensors surrounding that event talk the same thing, about the same thing. This is what we did. Any other question? Yeah.
Sasha Ivanovic, EUVRI, Stuttgart, Germany. I've heard, and I know it from the years which are now behind us in the 5 DRS project, that a lot has been done on guidelines and also on tools. Many of them were mentioned in Yvonne's presentation. The question which I would have is, what will happen with these tools after the projects are finished? Do we have a sort of a platform infrastructure? Is this platform related to that what is done elsewhere in other projects and in other places like JRC, SPRA or other places? And I think it's a question to be answered with the full set of constraints which reality imposes to us. Because you know that after the end of the project, it's not so easy to organize the exploitation, maintenance of these tools, and organized use of this tool. So if you could comment on this, tell me that there are some good news there, and maybe use this opportunity to start the discussion how we can improve in all projects on this. I'm talking from the side of smart resilience, where we are really thinking and talking about radical solutions as for exploitation and further dissemination. Thank you.
So, so the question, we are confronted by our project officer, and this is a challenge for all the projects, and this is a challenge at European level and a national level. So I can tell you some examples. In Sweden, they have in the National Research Council, they pay for how you can have spin-offs from European projects, because it's difficult to have all the Swedish stakeholders involved, or many stakeholders involved in the project. So they have a specific action on that. To have, in Norway, what we are doing is looking at the national level how we can have a spin-off of the projects. But it would be very good to have something at the European level, how we can work more with the integration of the guidelines, the use of the guidelines, more of the exploitation part of the guidelines, you know, because it has been a lot of work, and how this can be exploited by other projects, and but not the least by the end users, the critical infrastructures, how to have some projects, some idea that this can be funded, how we can facilitate exploitation of all these projects. So there's a challenge for the European Commission to have these kind of possibilities, and maybe Philippe has an answer now. So, but we are working within the projects on exploitation in terms of on consultancy level, on different activities at partners and as a projects. But Philippe?
Well, this is long-lasting problems and question, and it's a chicken and egg issue, because who is asking guidelines and be beneficiary of the guidelines? Is it the people who are developing guidelines, like research projects, which are pushing policymakers to use these guidelines, or are they to be mandated by decision makers at policy level with clear instructions? Here we are in a limbo, because we know that we need to have some clear indications about resilience here. Well, we speak about resilience that are related to certain level of certain number of policies, but without explicit request from the policymakers, at least at your level. We know that you are working in support of these policies, but it has not been tailor-made in their work program. So it's very difficult to engage them with a finalized product. If you have even the best guidance document of the world, will not make it if the policymakers have not been involved from the very beginning of the project. They will get this document and they will say, yes, it's a good job. You have done a fantastic job. Good book, good thesis, fantastic papers, but we cannot deal with this, because the reality of the policy-making process is such that we are, as policymakers, I'm speaking with my old hat of policymaker. As policymaker, we have to set a certain number of policy recommendations that have to be validated by member states. So we are very closely working with member state committees. It takes time, because we have, well, it's a kind of discussion, consultation. We are listening to experts, we are listening to research projects to arrive to a kind of compromise. It's not science, it's a compromise solution that we find with with member states. Once they agree with this compromise, then they will endorse this, and they will say, yes, this is a reflection of what we can accept at EU level. And it will become something which can be a Commission decision. If it's technical, it can be a communication of the Commission to the Council and Parliament. It will have a legal status somewhere, but it is very long process. When you get a product from a research project, which is even very well done, that you think, yes, we have done a good job, now it should be adopted by the member states. Well, the first level is the Commission. So you will go where? At DG ECO, DG Environment? I don't know where exactly. If you want to say, yes, this is supporting the Union Civil Protection Mechanism, Sendai framework, I will go to see DG ECO and say, yes, we have done this for you. Pass it to your member state committee and tell them that we have done a good job, they should adopt that. No way. it has to be, in a way, first well acknowledged by the Commission, and I think you are in a good way because, well, there is a dichotomy here, because we are funding this kind of project from DG Home, and we are a policy DG, but we are not necessarily preparing the ground with other policies because we don't know exactly what are doing all the projects. So if we are not really interacting with projects, which is quite difficult for us because we are not hundreds of people, you know, the people dealing with resilience, I think there are two in our unit and 2 or 3 in Adria. We are not numerous, so we cannot follow everything. So if we are not alerted from the very beginning, it's very difficult to say, okay, we will prepare the ground with our policy colleagues and say, hey, be aware that in 2 or 3 years there will be something coming. Prepare your member states committee because they will be involved at a certain point and ask to get a feedback. And I did this job when I was at DG Environment because I needed to have a very, very specific methodology backing up well, it was related to groundwater quality standards. And I had to pass this step to make the directive adopted by the Parliament. It worked because the development of the directive was carried out in parallel with the research project. So the member states people were constantly interacting with the research community, and at a certain point, projects delivered a recommendation that was discussed already with the policymakers, and it took 1 year more for the member states to take ownership of this document, because the science document was of very good value, but it was not necessarily corresponding to the best political compromise. So they had, well, a lot of discussions about issues that were a little bit sensitive for their implementation. It took 1 year more. And then, yes, it became an EU-endorsed guidance. Not a decision, not a standard. It was a EU guidance. No legal value, but used. It's very tricky, very complex, and I understand that research projects are far from this kind of complex mechanism. We have the duty as Commission to establish a mechanism that clarifies this from the very beginning, even when we are defining goals, the new proposals, identifying opportunities and telling, yes, you want to develop a guidelines with impact on policy, this is your roadmap over the next 3 or 4 years. If you want to achieve your point. You want to achieve a standard, please tell us, because this is your roadmap with different actors. You have a specific tools that you wish to be put on the market, these are your actors, from the very beginning. We did not do that. So you are not in, I would say, I'm not criticizing anything. I'm just saying that we have to learn by doing and improve the mechanism of interactions.
But no, but that's why we are here to discuss how we can do better things. But the way that the projects are designed now is that we have a strong involvement of the end users that we have done, and the end users are endorsing some of the guidelines and taking up this, adopting that. And what we have verified is that also that we are addressing specific needs. So we are not just doing research that is interesting, but it's research that is addressing specific needs from the community. But what you are saying is that next time, or how we involve policy right from the beginning, or perhaps it would be good if the Commission said, okay, we have already these policies that you can interact on from the beginning, because not all the projects have worked with policy in a very systematic way. Is that the conclusion?
In fact, it was to respond to Sasha's question, because it was what was behind his question. How is it endorsed by Commission, I would say, policy services and the member states? And my response was this, and I know perfectly that you have involved indeed users. You have worked bottom up, and it works very well because you have a recognition by people who are potentially using the guidelines. But the problem is that you are not universally with contacting users. So you will convince the people in your circle, maybe a big circle, but it will not be representative of the overall union. So you try then to put this up to a certain level, and then it blocks because it has not been prepared sufficiently. And it's where the problem is. It's not the quality of the work and the consultation and the recommendation which is in cause here. Is the acceptation at larger level of this recommendation. And this is only possible if you then pass to the kind of political level. And this is very tricky. It's quite complicated. It has to be anticipated, prepared in advance. And I don't have the, well, I have some ideas, but I don't have a clear solution on that. I simply know that we have to prepare the ground for it to happen, and to very clearly say also to our policy colleagues, you are part of the game. When we are asking you, look at this project deliverable, don't say that you don't have time, because it is impacting your policy. So we have to also be convincing enough to say, if member states would implement this guideline, it will save time, money, resources, and you will have a better agreement for your policy. So you will be gaining, actually, also benefits from your policy making world. But, well, it's a very, very long process, and we are all here to develop this. This kind of community is to not break silos, because I understand that we should not break silos, but bridging them, bridging the different sectors and say, okay, now we have done that, what is the next step? In your case, well, the only thing that we can hope is that your document will be circulated in different commission circles, and then at a certain point we'll say, yes, it's something that we can use, but it will not be anymore related to your projects. And maybe in 5 years, you will see these guidelines becoming a new guidance document. But you need to be very, very resilient yourself.
Don't want to take the floor too much, but the session is about questions and answers, so some of the answers will provoke new questions. So I'm not talking about imposing use or big things. I'm just talking about small things which we maybe can do in this big amount of projects which have produced large amount of results, very good results very often. I will just recall the times which I've spent on National Science Foundation projects in the United States at the time. And at that time, I don't think if they are still doing it, especially under Trump today, but at that time, each National Science Foundation project was supposed to ensure that the results of it are stored in the Library of Congress. And there was a sort of a file to be filled out and put, so everybody who after that was trying to use what was done or see what was done with this money or where the results can be found, was able to find it also from maybe in 5 years or 10 years after the project has been finished. So that is maybe the direction where we have to go, because I think that the risk of overlapping and the risk of producing the things which maybe remained on the somewhere hidden in the shelf is relatively high at this moment. When we have done this for nano projects, we were analyzing 2,500 nanotechnology related projects, and the results were astonishing in terms of how many things were repeated, how many things were done in the same way on different places in different times. So I think we have to think big. And the big problem is really big, how to organize it out. But maybe think about some small steps which we can undertake more or less now. I will not talk anymore.
I have a very quick reaction on that. You are speaking about the Anglo-Saxon system. So US, one language, Great Britain, proceed the same way with, for example, Environment Agency, where they have something to ask to the research community. It's very well described, and they have to deliver. NSF, the same thing. US EPA, the same thing. I don't know with Trump anymore. Well, EDPA is not existing anymore. Well, I'm joking, but this is a direct way. In Europe, we are 28, still 28 EU member states with 23 EU languages. And we have a very complex system of very heavy administration. Well, I confess, well, it's a Napoleon in a quill-like administration. It's quite heavy. But we have to face this. We are not a federation. We are a union of sovereign states, while the US is a federation. So you cannot compare this kind of system of relay of information from direct, I would say, mandated science to the decision makers, compare the US system with Europe. And we have to do a lot of things indeed to try to improve with the resources that we have, which are not very large. But we can debate that. It's a very long debate, and I'm thinking of this since 15 years, you know, so it's a big fight.
Just a small comment, and Sasha mentioned just the small things, and you mentioned doing bridges between silos, and maybe perhaps this conference can include end users and policymakers, so that we can have this discussion from projects together.
One comment. There is two approaches, the bottom-up and the top-down approach. The question is how you build a trust between the both approach, because for an example, if you see the H2020 program, it's a good example to illustrate the bottom-up issue, the bottom-up solution to answer an issue. My question is, I address your questions because you are on the European Commission. This is there is some guidelines, there is some normalization, and what is the link between the result and the resilience program included in the H2020 development program and the development, no, how we say, le déploiement, the deployment of the uptake of these solutions?
You are mixing policies and Horizon 2020. Horizon 2020 is defining research topics, research programming in consultation with scientists, policymakers, and so on. We are publishing calls which are supposed to deliver results that will be usable by policymakers. Our work is not, so our work is to do that and to ensure that we get high quality projects that will indeed deliver at the end. But we are not supposed to ensure, it's not our job to ensure that these results will be indeed taken up by industry or policy making. It's a step forward. And we can prepare the ground, and maybe we do not do sufficiently. This is clear. We have learned, we are learning the lesson. So maybe we have to help projects to proceed. So this is another story. We need to have another mechanism to improve the situation. But in a way, there is, what is behind actually is, I have two teenagers, you know, my boys. They are still at home. I'm just helping them while I'm financing their studies and so on. When they will be 25, you know, well, until 25, you know, because I don't want them to become tangy. I would hope that they will become adults and that they will leave the nest and earn their life. It's the same as for research projects. We are making our part of funding the projects, but then after we trust that the preparatory work will be such that new technologies will be, I would say, reaching the market, I would say, so it means preparing the innovation path, or that it will really support the policies, which is the policy path. I understand that it is not straightforward. It is not easy because the links are hard to establish, and we have to do our job as facilitator. This was not really well defined in our position, but since we are a program which is both research and policy, it is our duty to do that, and we are here to develop this.
Any other question for the European Commission?
I will take the microphone now from
Yeah,
Philippe.
okay.
I'm in the same table, so I can do it. It's not a question, it's just a remark. You know, we've been discussing the multiple definitions of resilience. That is about 300 or I think more. But this happens the same with innovation, and also happens the same with co-creation, co-whatever. So I don't use it lightly. When I put the innovation in some title, now I'm innovation manager, I don't know what about it, because the measure of innovation is the adoption. Can be market uptake, can be contracts, or simple use like Linux is an example of not adoption. Because everybody has some, but is not concentrated and enforced. There's not a clear path for that. Some other companies have achieved it. So it's just a comment that when we put that on a title, it's not just about making something new or polishing. That will be innovation, not innovation. So the adoption is the measure of innovation. If we cannot reach that point within the project, it's very hard to call it. Just that.
You want to come? Well, the innovation is not only for the market, it's only to create a new business, and it's one way to survive the operator. It's a question of surviving. It's not only a question of, it's resilience for the company too, okay? Yeah. Yes. And just to conclude, the interaction, from my experience, we found the solution until we are more flexible with the needs of the markets and the needs of the stakes on the climate change with the university and open innovations, because there are a lot of solutions. The solution is existing. The question is how to connect the private sector and the research sector. For me, this is the key of to win a new solution, because we have a lot. I show you a mapping of tools addressed on the climate change modelization. I identify 15 solutions only in Europe. The question is, who use these tools? There are some development who stay on the, how you say, yes, okay? And we are not exploited, we are not commercialized and don't, because this is a question of model, this is a question of marketing, perhaps, I don't know, you know, but we are a lot of solutions existing in Europe. The question is how you make a big and good, strong ecosystem to make linking with all the stakeholders. And we try to build this, to answer all these stakes, and we find one solution. That's why we created Resilience. Resilience is not only a marketing solution. This is an answer, or we have not the capacity to develop the resilience tool inside the VNC, for example, because we know that we are the more experienced, the more expert outside the group. Now you need to build exchange with us.
So on the definition, what the projects did is that they focus on different parts, and they say, okay, we adopt, like in the Darwin project, we are following the Holnagel definition, and they focus on adaptation and focus on community resilience as well. So there are different scopes within resilience, and I think that the point is that to be clear, okay, in this study or in this activity, we are focusing on these areas within resilience. That's the first part. On the part of adoption, I think it was very nice when we have the event of the DRS7 that it was a panel of end users telling how they have adopted or how they are using or how are their experiences of the project. So that the focus both on what we have done in terms of research, but focusing on the adoption, it can be very, very, very nice point from your side.
Okay, thank you very much. I think the time is good for go to lunch. And very, very two words regarding to the, also I can say my something. I think that the definitions is related also to the possibility to compare different resilience situation, because the risk is that if you adopt your own, you can say I am resilient, the other city behind you is resilient. Everybody is resilient, and we have tons of different definitions according to which one is resilient. Come on. I think some harmonization among different definitions is needed, at least to try to compare, because a layer for indicators, for any way to say, I'm similar to you or I'm very different, and I have a huge deviation between my objectives instead of you that you are more aligned, is needed to compare policy, is needed to compare performance, is needed to compare also resilient in the city and infrastructure, I think. And to conclude, I
would like to say something not politically correct, just as a reaction to Yvonne's comment, because you are fully right. As soon as you have users endorsing a new method and new guidelines that they're happy with, even if their boss did not tell them you have to use that, they are representing the operating force. And here, the scientific community has a kind of political power that they don't use maybe consciously, but in a way, there is a change of paradigm, a change of methods that are being validated by the people who are using these, that are really working. And they will hopefully put this up to their different authorities. And this can represent a change of the policy. It's quite hard, and I think we are all living this kind of situation with the financial situation and so on. We know that we have to make a change, which climate change and so on. If we are waiting for the authorities to act, we will not do anything. So the change will be occurring if the society is trying to change. So it's exactly what you are saying. If there is indeed a change that is pushed, arising at bottom up, it might have an effect. But it's a little bit harder in a way, certainly, but perhaps more efficient. I don't know.
Thank you very much. Any other very last comments to add to the discussion? No. Okay, thank you. Just, I think the best word that can summarize this discussion is about evolution. Evolution in definitions, evolution in any knowledge, evolution in involving policymakers, and something like that. Thank you very much.
You should be there. You say you were a tourist. He's a tourist up to something. Yeah. The rate that is always there. I'm a believing tourist.